Awesome. So yeah, welcome to Masks and Maladjustments. This is a real conversation offered by Shuva Center. If you're new to us, I'll tell you a little bit about Shuva Center. We are a Jewish nonprofit recovery home and community that supports addicts of all kinds and people from all walks of life. And we integrate Jewish wisdom, addiction recovery resources, spirituality, and community. And we're based in New York. And I'll introduce our two hosts this evening and then go over some kind of ground rules to support us in having a safe space. So I'll start with Rabbi Iggy, who is founder of the Shuva Center. He's a renowned Talmud teacher, spiritual counselor, artist, and educator. He grew up between Belgium and Israel, so expect him to be well-dressed and blunt, as well as the United States in a traditional Jewish Orthodox home. He's author, speaker, teacher, and contributor on subjects ranging from Talmud, Jewish text, spirituality, addiction, recovery, fatherhood, LGBTQI+ issues. And we are really excited to have Gary Katz with us tonight. Gary is a licensed clinical social worker with a private practice called the Center for Intimacy Recovery, based in New York City, where he works with individuals, couples, and groups. His primary focus is on relationships, attachment, and intimacy. He's trained and worked at the Sexual Addiction Trauma and Training Center and served on the board of National Council of Alcohol and Drug Dependency and JACS, which is Jewish Alcoholics, Chemically Dependent Persons, and Significant Others. He's also been involved in the Jewish education for over 26 years at a variety of synagogues, Jewish day schools, Hebrew schools, and Jewish summer camps. And he primarily works with individuals, couples, and groups in the areas of trauma, attachment, intimacy, love, and sex addiction, alcohol and chemical addiction, male survivors of sexual abuse. So I'll just go over some agreements this evening. So we ask that you practice mindful listening. Please, if you do share in the comments, we invite you to share freely if you have any questions or insights that arise, and make sure to just keep the focus on yourself. And then be kind and respectful in the chat is what we ask. And please feel free to share and participate in the chat throughout the evening. And Rabbi Iggy and Gary Katz will field as many questions and reports as time permits. So with that, I will hand it over to Rabbi Iggy and Gary Katz. Have a great event.
Thank you. And thank you, Jessica, for introducing us and helping us with all this. This really can't happen without the team, without Jessica and Yaniv and Ben. And it's nice to see you, Gary.
It's nice to see you too. And I just have to say, I've said it before we started, I have such envy at the quality of your resolution on your lens. I feel like I really see you.
You do, right? You can see my pores. You can see absolutely everything. Yes, I mean, I just switched to this new setup of camera, and I'm really chuffed with it. So yeah. So, but thank you for recognizing my effort to look good for this evening and in general.
Well, I struggle with the same.
So so Purim, right? A Freilichen Purim, right? Happy Purim for everybody. This is our version of trying to do something that's sober for Purim. Our Purim is so difficult for a lot of people, and really for us to sort of to come together without the pressure of drinking, and really with the added focus of connecting and being with each other and sort of talking about sort of things that really matter to us is really sort of like what we're doing. It's really important. So for those people who don't know, right? So like, you know, because we're going to talk about masks and maladjustments, sort of like, what's with mask? Why today? Why Purim? You know, any thoughts?
Well, maybe what we could first just do, I'm sure there are some people here who aren't familiar with Purim, maybe just explain what that is, and then we'll talk about the connection to masks.
Sure. Right. So Purim is a Jewish holiday that celebrates the turning of events and the liberation and the freedom of Jews in Persia at the time, right? So like we have a few big heroes in this story that we read on Purim every year in something called the Megillah, which is basically the Yiddish word for a scroll, the Hebrew word for a scroll. And this Megillah talks about, right? So like a king, Hashverosh, King Xerxes, about his first wife Vashti, and then about a evil doer, a descendant of what we believe to be Amalek, right? So like the paradigm of like evil or the non-kind sort of like attitudes of human beings, who seeks out to destroy the Jews. And we have these two heroes, but really more importantly, which is interesting, our heroine. We have Mordechai, who's the sort of her uncle, but the main heroine of the story, the person who really we should be thanking for our salvation, is Queen Esther, right? Who goes and on behalf of her people, on behalf of her uncle, so like really becomes a consort to King Ahasuerus, and through her wisdom is able to turn the tides and make us be part of working with the king and the kingdom, and not being persecuted by Haman and his followers. And as it turns out, at the end, Haman gets hung and viled while we rejoice in the story of the Megillah. So that's kind of and that's what we're celebrating Purim.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, there's so many beautiful layers of story and messages in it, but I guess one of the primary ones that connects to what we're here for tonight is that it's the only book that doesn't have God's name mentioned in it, and it's a story that evolves over more than 13 years with a lot of coincidences. And so they, a lot of people who happen to overhear other conversations or be picked at the right time for the right situation. And it's really the most similar to maybe our lives today, in that it's all run kind of through within the laws of nature. So if you think about Old Testament and even later, like New Testament miracles, many of them they suspend the laws of nature, right? Like the splitting of the Red Sea, the plagues in Egypt. But the story of Purim in this holiday is about is not the laws of nature are suspended, but finding meaning and finding God and finding connection within everyday life, within the laws of nature. And so not being able to see God is kind of covered this, under coincidence, under everyday routine, is like, for some, the origin of why people wear masks on this holiday, because what you see is not necessarily what you think you see. And that's kind of part of the message that, it's probably the source of that phrase, man plans and God laughs, that God's running things, ranging from the weather to parking spaces or even more important things. And it's also the idea that there's multiple layers of things going on in our lives, even within ourselves. And so that's really one of the sources for wearing masks for this holiday. People think of it as like a cute thing for kids, and that's who really usually dresses up. But it's actually got a very substantial meaning to it, is that it's about seeing beyond the veil, beyond either what we think we see in life, and having faith and trust that there's a bigger plan for ourselves and for others, or really also seeing a deeper way into ourselves and not just what's on the surface.
Yeah. I think that that is a great way to sort of like step into the mask, in the sense of sort of that it's really on us to sort of try and find God, find the meaning, look at what's in front of us, and the tension between what we see and what we don't see, what we conceal and what we reveal, right? So like, and hence the beginning of our conversation about sort of these masks, right? Sort of, which is really interesting, right? Just to sort of like kind of wet our beaks, right? So like the first two comments we had here was like, right, somebody who says, I'd like to learn how self-imposed masks that have become habit can be changed. And Rick writes, right, here to learn to grow curious about the coping mechanisms I haven't discovered yet, right? So I think, right, first and foremost, right, to acknowledge, I think, right, we were speaking before about why do we wear masks, right? So like it is a coping mechanism in sorts, isn't it? We always react with putting on the mask.
Yeah, and it's funny what you said. We kind of we skipped over it, I think, and that, but you had mentioned that Purim is often a holiday that's challenging for some Jews to be sober on. So I just wanted to, maybe we should explain what that means, and that connects to the masks, and that Purim is a holiday that has a lot of drinking in Jewish tradition, more than any holiday. And so when a Jewish person who maybe was very observant of the holiday in general gets sober, it's often one of the two most challenging holidays. And for me, I'll just say that it was the one time a year that I would get sober for many years. The only day of the year that I would get sober. It was a great time. It was the only, it was the one day a year I would get drunk, and that was it. The rest of the year, never.
How is that called? I think in psychology, you guys have a term for it, like something with an F.
You mean a Freudian slip?
That's the one.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was the only time of year that I would get drunk until it wasn't.
Right.
Until it became a problem. And there's like in early recovery, for me at least, Purim was hard.
Yeah.
Because it was, I had really nice associations of drinking. We would get in rabbinical school, we would get drunk and it was like, go to the rabbis and sing. It was a really crazy time.
Right.
I'm not sure. So it's nice memories. It wasn't like the bottom of the barrel memories. And so, but even the drinking on Purim, one of the reasons that there's so much drinking on Purim is because much of the Megillah takes place with drinking. And so it's commemorated, but it's also the idea, as it says, I'm sure you know, like in the Talmud, that nichnas yayin yetze sod, that when wine or alcohol goes in, secrets come out. And so that also is an idea connected to masks too, which is that what's inside isn't always what's shown on the outside. And sometimes alcohol loosens that.
Always. Yeah. And to add on that, right? So that's sort of that one of the designations of Purim, one of the mitzvahs of Purim, sort of we're commanded to, is to drink so much that we would not know the difference between Haman, right, and Mordechai, between good and evil, right? So that we are commanded to be in such an inebriated state that we really would mix them up. I'll probably say this again because I think sort of that one of the interesting things about it for me as we talk about this is that one of the ways that sort of I've been looking at this in terms of sobriety and not drinking is that regular people need so much alcohol to be able to recognize, to sort of like confuse or not see Haman and Mordechai in the same space. That sort of that right, we need to be so uninhibited and so inebriated that sort of that's the only way to get to a place. But I think people in recovery, I would want to, or at least I think that's what I'm striving for, right, is that I don't need alcohol to understand that there's a Haman in me as there is a Mordechai in me. That I don't not just confuse them, that I know that there's a Haman and Mordechai, and I know that they're interchangeable. That there is sort of like, we have to look at both sides of ourselves.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So again, Haman and Mordechai, Haman was the evil protagonist, and Mordechai was the good protagonist. But what's interesting is that that's really what we want to help people and go from addiction, any addiction, to recovery also, is going from all or nothing, black and white thinking, to much more nuanced thinking. And that's exactly what you're saying. That is, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. It's not entirely my own, right? Like the Zohar talks about, Haman and Achashverosh, but so like Haman and Mordechai is two parts of a person in that sense, of this, of the just right. We have to figure out, and then that experience is important to see. And I think when we look at it through the recovery, things, and speaking of masks, right, one of the theories that why masks are called masks is the Spanish word. I can't remember the Spanish words, but it is more than one face. Mas con la cara, I think it's. But
well, there's an Aramaic phrase also, right? Like in the Zohar about the two faces too.
Right. So that's sort of like, right, the two sides of it. But But I think in that sense, for a lot of people, yes, sort of because everybody's so drunk and everything, for a lot of people in recovery, I think it's very difficult this holiday to sort of try and really,
Right.
yeah.
And so alcohol itself is a form of a mask for many people, right? It's a way that that people may choose to mask emotions.
Right.
It's a way that they may mask fear, right? Being called liquid courage, right? People might drink in order to get on the dance floor
That's right.
because so it masks their fear of what it feels like to dance, not with a little, a
Right.
little lubrication, and it also it can mask pain. And so if we just start talking about masks from alcohol with Purim, we might be able to use that as an example for many other kinds of masks. That many times masks begin as a way to feel okay.
That's right.
And they start out as like, I just want to feel okay. I just want to feel comfortable in my own skin, or I just need to stop whatever chaos is going on either inside a person's head or body or in their home. And then, so for some people it might be alcohol or drugs, for some people it might be sex or getting validation through relationships, for other people it might be food, or even things like being a good student or being the best student. I always joke about how when I taught 11th and 12th grade honors girls Talmud in Hillel in North Miami Beach, I had a group of girls called the Whiteout Girls, because they sat on in the front row always, and they had a bottle of whiteout, and every note that they were taking had to be perfect. And if they didn't get my exact words down, they would take out the whiteout bottle, white it out, and they would be like, "Can you tell us what exactly you said after the word third?" And I would be like, "I don't know this," but it was like, and those are the kids in school that I worry about, not the kid who's the goof off in the back of the class, because he'll get addressed or she'll get addressed, but the ones who have to be so perfect, they're the ones. That's a mask. And so most people's masks start out as a way to feel okay, or like I think Terry Real, who's a therapist up in Boston, often says that what starts out as adaptive becomes maladaptive.
Correct.
So then it has like all those unintended side effects like that come with them later on. But when they are begun, no one thinks like, oh, I'd love for this coping thing that makes me feel good to turn into a full-blown addiction, or I'd love for it to create this problem, or I'd like to go to max out my credit card on Amazon because there's a pandemic and I don't know what else to do with my time. I don't know where that came from.
No, 100%, you're right. And when we talk about this very often, I think we were talking about last time, that most addiction starts as a solution to a problem, right? Most addiction start is, like you said, like to drink to lubricate us, social anxiety, whatever. And that would start, and even down, I mean, I don't know if you've read, and I highly recommend this book called Excellent Sheep. It's about the education of the elites in America. And in that there is a whole section about these sort of young women, right, who strive for excellence always, right? So to be good in high school, to do the whatever, the extracurricular, the lacrosse, to get into college, right? To get married, have kids, go to graduate school, and all in this promise is you'll be happy, right? You'll be happy when this happens. And then, right, there's a lot of people within the work that we do who, young women, young men who were the good boys and the good girls, right? I was the good girl. I did everything you asked me to. I got good grades. I got into college. I got a degree. I got a master's in social work. I have a husband. I have 2 kids. You promised me I'll be happy, and I'm not.
Right. And so I think what's really important, well, first of all, I think that both, male and females, there are certain gender unique masks. Like if we go into the Little Shop of Horrors store, there's like masks for women specifically, like be the good girl, always take care of everybody. Masks for men, be this way. But I think that the really important thing here, and it's not just, but I just want to say also, like you said, it's not limited to addictions.
Right.
It's a mask of being the funny guy.
That's right.
A mask of being the good student or the good girl or the good boy, a mask of what it looks like to be a religious person. And if you're in a religious community, like there's a lot of masks that people wear. And I think what's important to note is that often at the end of the road with the mask, the person sits in shame about because of where the masks have taken them.
Right.
But if they can just go trace them back to that moment, to actually realize that there was something that their healthy self
Right.
brought them to that place, or as you said earlier, they're Mordecai, right? Like the healthy part of themselves, the good part of themselves, it helped them survive something. It got them to feel seen. I think that's what almost, and this is really the like the painful I don't know what the word is, but the painful piece of it is that most of the masks that we all wear are really attempts to be seen.
That's right.
And then they make it harder to get seen.
But that's the thing I was about to say. You're in shame and isolation because the mask that you put on, right? The mask that we put on that we thought made us, right? I'm the jock, I'm the thing, I'm the rabbi, I'm the caretaker, I'm the father, I'm the mother, I'm the this, right? We know that it's not us. We know it's fake. So we also feel, right? We feel the imposter syndrome. We feel that now we can't even say who we are because then people will think like that we lied to them. So the mask that we thought will bring us sort of to fit in has actually created this huge isolation in us and around us. And we feel alone. So we feel shame and guilt and isolation. And those are addiction's three best friends.
Yeah. And that's also why a lot of mask wearing is similar, is a form of codependency. Right. And also every addiction is a form of codependency underneath, because it's all about losing myself. And in a way, the ultimate mask is I'll be whoever you want me to be.
Right. In a real, and that's the thing. So the sadness is this: in a real attempt to fit in, to belong, in a real attempt, right? Sort of, if I pretend to be this, you'll accept me for this, and then I will feel connected, right? It is such a misfire, right? A missed the mark of attempted connection.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I don't know. More and more, I see that that's ultimately the thing that what everybody wants is to feel seen. Maybe even more than to be loved, is to feel seen. And you know, you think about it through the progression of our life. A little baby, when somebody like leans over their face and is like "Gucci Gucci goo" in their face, you see them light up because they feel seen, and that's how we develop our sense of worth. Like, oh, this person feels I'm important enough to look at me. And then you look at the little kids who are walking around and they trip and fall, and then they hit the ground and they look over to see if their mom is watching.
Right.
And they see her watching. That's when they cry, right? Like, because they want to be seen. Or you look at the kid who's misbehaving in school. All that is a cry to be seen. And a lot of times these things are diagnosed for so many other things like ADD, ADHD, right? Like it's a biological thing. And maybe it's or even other types of physical manifestations of trauma, of a desire of not being seen. They manifest in their body. And so then they act them out emotionally. And a teenager who acts in a certain way, like, like they have to dress a certain way, they're wanting to be seen, even though they don't want their parents to see them, but they want to be seen desperately by their parents. And then even in healthy ways at work, we all want to be seen by our bosses for being productive and bringing value, and it feels good. Like, and we want to be seen in our romantic relationships and our friendships and our family. And so much of the mask that we use is a way to either get seen or to like soothe ourselves from the pain of not being seen.
Right. The thing with the child is so important, right? So like we had a real conversation. Also, it's part of the work with George Haas from Meta Group, right? Who talks about this sort of the delight that sort of the most secure people where their parents, their caretakers, very early, and delight in them no matter what, right? And I think sort of in that sense, I agree with you. Sort of that attachment and the need to be seen is really important. So we want to be seen, but then we're so afraid then to take off the mask, right? We're so afraid to show people our true self, right? So there's this tension there, and perhaps even sort of like a sad irony, right? Sort of that if all we want is to be seen, and yet we are constantly petrified to take off the mask, then we will never be seen. So why are we so afraid? Why are we still so afraid to take off the mask?
Are you asking me? Or are you?
Yes, no, I'm asking you, of course.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's a conversation, Gary.
Oh, it's a conversation. I didn't understand. Okay. I thought you were going to answer your own question. Rabbis are known to do that at times. So,
Is that a dig?
No, I was speaking about myself too. I think that the wound of not being seen, especially at a young age, is so painful. I think just like being seen is the most important thing, the wound of not being seen is the most painful wound that we have. And so if our hearts are fragile, our souls are fragile, our nervous systems, you think about a little kid's nervous system, and when it gets hurt, when they get hurt, why it's a healthy response to not want to take that risk. People don't want to get hurt again. We all, if I imagine like if all of our hearts have like nicks and bruises and cuts and band-aids and like some of them are like strung together with just because we get them banged up in so many ways, whether it's from primary caregivers who are doing their best maybe but just didn't know how to do it or are struggling with their own stuff, to like kids being mean in school. I mean, kids are mean. I taught in schools for 26 years. Kids are beautiful, but they can be really mean to each other, and in fact, most people who come into therapy, it's about what was said or not said to them, not physical violence, although that exists. But and so it's so painful those hurts are so painful, we don't want to revisit them. So in relationships, people will do things like, I'll leave you before you can leave me. That's a way to save themselves from pain. Or I'll keep everybody like this, that's a mask too, right? Hey, how's it going? Oh, great. Yeah, we'll get together. No way. But I'll let you in, but not really in. Or like that, what was that song with the Secret Garden? Like, she'll never let you into that spot.
Right.
She'll keep you out of that spot. That song by Bruce Springsteen for the movie with Tom Cruise. We keep these parts, or like Billy Joel's song "The Stranger," like we keep these parts hidden away. And some are satin, some are steel, some are laces, some are leather. Like they all have different flavors, but we are too scared to really let people in. But the problem is when we do that, we don't just save ourselves from hurt, we save ourselves from joy too. We rob ourselves of joy, love, connection, the thing that we desperately want. Because you can't tamp down yourself emotionally just in one area. You can't say, well, I'm going to make sure I don't ever feel pain and sorrow. So if you numb yourself out that way, then you numb yourself out across the board, and then you don't get the benefit. And like
there's no silos.
There's no silos. So like, unfortunately, if you want to feel big love, you also have to be open to feel big pain. And you also have to take the risk. No one's going to get the connection and the fulfillment and the love or whatever of relationships, whatever form or levels of relationships there are, or they're seeking, without taking the risk of getting really hurt. It's just like, it's an example I remember in a video from Brene Brown, like calling the doctor's office to see if your cancer tests are positive or negative. If you don't make the call to find out that, oh, thank God they're okay, I'm okay, you'll never know, but you're taking the risk of finding the negative news too.
Right. And a lot of people don't want to do that, right? And this is true for all sorts of things, right? So like, right, for opening your mail or saying I love you or asking for help, or right, we constantly don't want to have good news or no or rejection in that sense, right? I think that the whole tempering thing, I think, is very, very important. And I also think it's interesting, right, that sort of that I often think that sort of some people will, you said that place sort of like, okay, so they'll say, oh, you're close to me, so I'll take off this mask, right? But I will still leave a space between my real self and what I think is self. And I keep calling that authenticity, right? Like you think it's authentic, right? But it's faux.
Yeah.
Right. And you still, right, and you still are guarded, even though people think like, oh, I knew that person so well. But and this is sort of the other thing, I think, right? So it's so much energy to maintain those facades, to maintain those masks, right? You have to so much mental, spiritual energy has to be wasted on, on that.
Yeah. And also, you sometimes forget you're even wearing the mask. It becomes like a second skin, like that you don't even realize it. And so you think, people come into my office and they'll be like, oh, I'm just anxious. My whole family's anxious. That's just the way we are. And I'm like, I doubt you were anxious the moment you were born, although maybe in utero from your mother's nervous system. But there's reasons that people are those ways.
Right.
And so, it often leads to a lot of isolation, whether isolation in a traditional sense of I'm home alone by myself because I don't want to put myself out there, or isolation, the more painful type, I think, which is I'm in a room full of people and I'm too scared to let myself be seen. It's not that they don't see me. I'm too scared to let myself be seen. So I'll engage in conversation.
Right.
I'll even like talk about feelings, and everyone will be like, wow, he's so, or she's so open, or feel so close to them. But I know that I'm holding back.
Right. The times I felt the most lonely was when rooms full of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question here from David says,
Yeah. That's what I was just trying to address.
right? So not being seen as the most painful, so then we don't want people to see us. Is that a contradiction? So it sounds like a contradiction, but it really isn't, right? So like right, that's the maladaptive part, right? The maladaptive part, right, is we want to be seen, but we're afraid that if we're seen for who we are, we're going to be rejected. So as a response, we don't show ourselves.
Well, we only show a part of ourselves.
Right, or the part that we think will please others, right?
Right. And so I think it speaks to that, I think it speaks so much to how powerful the need is for connection with others, that despite all these ways that we avoid connection, we still yearn for it at the same time. I could sit in a room full of guys, let's say running a group for a group of men who all were having like compulsive, addictive sexual behaviors, and ended up choosing, every single one chose to stay in their marriage if their spouse still let them. I'm like, why, guys? Like you had your outs, because they want connection ultimately, even more than they want the other thing. And even that compulsive behaviors of seeking connection is a
right.
desire.
I mean, that's the maladaptive, right? They're seeking. I often talk about, especially when we do work with gay men, sort of that sort of, when people, like somebody will say like, oh, you're sexy, oh, you're hot, I want you, I lust for you, whatever. What the brain then says, what they hear is you're special, I care for you, you matter, right? It's right, sort of, it becomes this sort of misfire, because we think that the intimacy, the sex, right, is going to give us that special connection, that feeling, but it doesn't. Right. And therefore there's so many people who like they'll have sex and they'll immediately look for more.
Correct. I don't think gay men have the monopoly on that.
No, of course not. Of course, I'm just talking from the experience. I mean, in general, gay men have a monopoly of everything, but yeah, in this particular thing, you're right.
They have it first, and then it gets co-opted by the heterosexual world, right? Like how you find a new neighborhood.
That's right. Or the gay beard, right? We were wearing it, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to, wear a beard. Like, no.
I just want to address something that Christina wrote, which is
yes.
Christina, which is that, are there masks we wear for societal expectations? Yes. And in fact, I had this experience this morning. I'm down in northeast Florida right now until tomorrow when I go back to New York. And coronavirus in Florida is very different than in New York City, or even in upstate New York.
In Florida. There's no coronavirus in Florida, apparently.
But it was a shock for me when I first got down here a month ago to go into town and see most people not wearing masks, including servers at some restaurants. And the first night we were out to dinner, I was like, I'm not coming back here. The server's not wearing a mask. And then fast forward this morning, I was like, after being here, I have a feeling if I had been here for the entire time of the pandemic, I would have I don't know if I would not wear a mask at all. I probably still would, but it would be I would have a different relationship to mask wearing than I do from coming from New York City, which got hit hard and fast. And I know many, I'm not the only one, but know many people who passed away from this. And this woman that we were talking to yesterday, she said, "Oh, you guys are from New York. Oh wow, like it's so much easier here with the mask because we're during the pandemic because we're less restricted." And she wasn't saying it in an obnoxious way. She was saying it like matter of fact. And I realized that's what made me think about it. Like, truthfully, I wish I would say I was so careful if I had been here the entire pandemic, but I probably wouldn't, because we do respond to societal expectations for masks, not just in the pandemic, going back to Christina's question, but also in life. Like you said, the example earlier, Iggy, I think the expectations for women from society are very different than the expectations for men. You were talking about sex. Let's just say that how a woman acts regarding sex or sexual or relationship is very different than how the societal expectations that are made for a man. So, for example, women have to wear a mask that, just look at dating apps. When women, the types of pictures that they feel they have to post is a form of a mask, but they're not supposed to like sex too much, because then they're a slut or they're bad or a bad girl, right? Or they're not supposed to. I had girls in that same class as the whiteout girls, actually. I had them a different period the same day with boys, and all of a sudden these girls who were so smart got quiet and dumb because they didn't want to be smarter than the boys. That was a mask.
No, absolutely. There's a right. Sorry, go on.
No, sorry.
No, I said, like, there's a question. What about, Amy asked, what about the person with mask who also then mask themselves to their self? How can they begin to be accountable to themselves and others and emerge to their greatest potential?
That's an excellent question. That's like David's second question too, right?
Right.
Well, I think that's, when we use the word teshuva with your, you don't have the monopoly on the word, but when
I do, trademark.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
I
own teshuva.
Okay, teshuva means return. It's the term.
Okay, you just owe me $10.
It's the Hebrew term for repentance.
Right.
It's not repentance, but it means return, because it's returning to our authentic selves.
Right.
And that's the same term we use in recovery too, right? Recovery is I'm recovering my authentic self. That's the whole journey, learning who I am. And really, in a certain sense, like that's the whole journey of life, is shedding these masks that we either get maybe from our families or from society or the communities or whatever, so that we can be our truest self.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a little detour with addiction, and then have to recover from that and be authentic and not need that. But I think that most of our adult lives are spent learning who we are, and that sometimes we have these moments where the growth curve is like this, and other times where it's like this, right, where there's a lot of growth in one moment. It's like all this insight, bam, 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 often caused by a huge something in your life, like event, a heartbreak, a job, something like that, like that causes you to really look deep inside and be like, this isn't working for me anymore.
Right.
That's often if the person can like start to look at things when there's like, this doesn't serve me the way it used to. So that's when I want to change it.
Right. So I would say a few things to that answer on top of what you said, which I agree with 100%. Right. So like tshuva, yes, tshuva means repent. It also means return, right? But it also means an answer, right? A tshuva. And I think that sort of like with it is, and this is why we call tshuva SATTI, right? It is in this nexus, in this Venn diagram, Amy, that sort of that we find ourselves. And I think the first step is a hard, not hard, but like a really clear look at yourself. Right? How can they begin to be accountable to themselves is just by looking. So one of the things for us, right, is Tshuva Group, for example, right? Was sort of one of the tools that we've developed to be accountable to the self, to sort of look at why we do the way we do, right? Tshuva means for us, to look at our day, at our life, at our action through three lenses: truth, remorse, and responsibility. Right? Is it through those lenses that we start being accountable? And then I can start like really ask myself, like, what are the masks I'm wearing? And to answer somebody else who was said before, like, right, sometimes, right, the mask I'm wearing is needed, but I have to be conscious of it. Yes, I'm putting on the mask of president of the board, right? But I need to also take it off, right? I'm going to be educator, but then I have to come home. I'm going to be like powerful CEO, but then I also need to be husband or wife or whatever, right? So like, and you have we have to start with acknowledging that we play roles, right? Which is very Jung, right? To try and acknowledge that those masks, because when we, like you said, sometimes when we forget, because we put on the mask so much, when we forget and we start to identify with the mask, then that's when we're in trouble, because then we can't separate ourselves from those things. We always have to keep a path, and that's the return, I think, in Tshuva, a path to the self. What is that path? I may put on this mask. I may be like, even as a parent, right? I may be the authoritarian, right? I may be strict, whatever you did something wrong, but I have to remember the path of love, right? Because I'm also the parent. And I have to sort of make sure that I always know those differences.
Right. And also, you know, one of the things they say in recovery is like know your motive, like what's your real motives. And I think in a different way of saying that is like, what is really going on inside of you? And that's the biggest thing that a person can learn in therapy is to listen to themselves. What's my authentic self? What's my gut? Not what's the person who wants to perform and make everyone happy. Not what's the person who is scared of people's opinions if I decide to come out or to act a certain way. Not what's like, am I going to let others down or societal expectations, but what does my gut tell me is true? Because if, and we get that's part of the, that happens with maladaptive behaviors is we disconnect from ourselves and we don't pay attention to what we really feel because we're still trying to play all these roles. And so as we slowly peel one role, one layer off and the next layer off, the next layer off, what does my authentic self say? And so, you know, being in Florida, I give this example a lot. When first time I ever came to Florida, I lived here in 1994. And the person I was living with hated Florida. She couldn't stand it. She was from Manhattan. And so we moved back to New York a year later. And that whole time I hated Florida too. And then a few years later, we weren't together anymore and I came down for something and I was like, oh, ocean. I like ocean. Manatees. I kind of like manatees. Like, oh, I like Florida. And I realized the only reason I said I didn't like Florida at the time, my opinion's evolved since then, but the only reason I didn't say like it then is because she didn't like it.
Right.
And so I was just taking on an opinion and a stance because of what this other person took on.
Do you find people come and you say like, oh, but what is your self? I think a lot of people, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, like they will be like, I don't know. I've never been asked this question, or like, right? I don't even like, how do I know? Right? I think people even get lost because that voice is so lost.
Yes, because they've just been trying to like stay afloat or to feel okay, and like kind of responding to what Zeb said also, and to Sherry's question is like, yes, almost every adaptation from some kind of painful experience is a way just to feel okay. And that's really, I think if we can connect to that, we can kind of feel less shame about it. Right. It may have led us to act in ways that we feel bad about, that we're not proud of.
Right.
And, you know, but shame is really the core of who we are. Our maladaptive behaviors are not the core of, like, shame is like, I am a mistake, not that I did a mistake.
Right.
But a maladaptive behavior is not even our authentic self. It was an adjustment. So like, if I became that junkie and then I'm stealing money to support my habit, like I did those things, I have to be accountable for those things. I hurt people's feelings, I robbed them, owe them money, but that's not the authentic person that I am. Now, that doesn't really go over in a court, but in working with somebody to go deeper into themselves, that's where we want to take them.
It's funny because I see it from a slightly different perspective. So a lot of people like will come to my office, right? And even though they've done really horrible things, right? Sort of, right? We work with, right? Sort of people who've done all sorts of horrible things. We say, well, I'm the person inside. And I always say like, yes, but sort of, I hear you, but who we are is what we do.
Yes.
Right? Who we are is the actions we take. So you may be like, oh, I'm really nice inside, right? We're talking as we were preparing, right? It's a matter of perspective, right? So Pablo Escobar, monster, right? But was also a great son to his mother.
Right. I don't think that's what I meant.
No, for sure. I'm illustrating the fact so that I
Yeah.
think there's always.
Oh, okay. So now we're touching on. So in other words, what I'm trying to convey to the person is that they have an authentic self that is separate from whatever behaviors they did, although they have to still connect and take ownership over those behaviors. You're talking about someone who's using that like almost, well, I'm really a good person as a way to not look at those behaviors. I'm talking about the persons at the other end of the spectrum where all they feel is shame and pain about what they've done, and they can't even get in touch with the person that's inside of them. You're talking about the guy who's like, well, I'm a mass murderer. I've caused millions of people to get addicted. I've like killed, all the don't like Pablo Escobar, but I'm a good person because I'm a good son to my mother. So that's a mask of denial.
Right, I'm saying that's the maladaptive. So
Yes.
that for him, from that perspective, that and this is of course a very extreme example, but I think for a lot of people, sort of like to always, because one of the comments after the thing was, right, so are the cognitive distortions that come with the mask that make them maladaptive? In that sense, yes, right. That's what it is, right? It is sort of like if you keep on the mask too much, or if you don't ask yourself about the mask, or if you don't want to look at the other thing, then it becomes maladaptive. Then becomes illusion and lying and deceit, and then you're in a lot more trouble,
Yes.
right? Marlene says, so how can I, as a parent, change my interactions with my adult children to be less dysfunctional? I think
Well, tell the kids to behave better. Isn't that really the going to solve
right,
it?
exactly. Better bribes is the answer. No, I think that's a very complex question, and I think it takes time. But I think that at the end of the day is always about you
What
have
was
to.
the question again? Because I don't see it.
How can I as a parent change my interactions with my adult children to be less dysfunctional? And what I'm saying is, and I don't know if you agree, but like what I'm saying is, um, it's complex, but either at the end of the day, it will come to two things that you can have control over, right? You can't have control of somebody else, but you control how you model communication and relationship, right? And how open and vulnerable you are.
Yeah. So be real,
That's
right?
right.
The best thing that I think we can do with our adult children is be real and find that balance between not burdening them with our emotions and
Right.
them having to take care of us, but modeling for them our emotional world and emotional world in a way that doesn't burden them so that they can learn to have that too. And I do think I have adult children also. I do think that it still impacts them greatly and helps them when they see us be authentic and real. So if I am learning, even as an adult, to listen to myself more and to not fear the community or the this or the that, they see that still, and it still makes a difference.
Absolutely. Is a undesired behavior truly maladaptive if it serves the purpose of seeking safety or connection? Isn't all problem behavior adaptive if it serves a purpose? So I will say, from my personal, right, and I've written about this and I've talked about this. Um, I grew up right in a ultra orthodox community, right? Um, I knew from a very young age that the only way to feel safe, the only way to feel safe is to pretend, is to put on a mask. So I was mimicking how people behaved. I was mimicking how people talked. I was mimicking like, right, sort of like I knew that the only way I could achieve safety, personal safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, was by lying about who I am, what I want, what I desire. Right. So that maladaptive thing was at the time safety. But I can tell you that later on, I had to take apart a lot of this because lying was very easy for me. Pretending was very easy for me, right? Relationships were disposable only to the effect of how much I can use it for me, right? And that was when it becomes maladaptive, because I had to take that apart, because I had to untangle within me, right, through the help of a lot of professionals, right, that safety and lying are not the same thing and not together. And that's when it becomes maladaptive. And that's when we have to be careful. So even if it started a solution and it did save me, right, absolutely saved me, I needed to take care of it much later on, because otherwise I can jump into that very quickly. I can fall very quickly into like, oh, I didn't do it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting in that world. which I was in also, I think about one of the yeshivas, rabbinical schools that I was in, 500, 600 guys. Everyone's wearing a white shirt, a black hat, dark pants. And so they still yearn to be seen. So what becomes the thing? Your glasses. Glasses, you touched it right at the right time. Glasses becomes like how they express themselves. So like just like at a school where there's a dress code, well, let's say a high school there's a dress code, kids find a way to express themselves. The need to be seen. Same thing in rabbinical school. And in my school, I was one of, there were only 3 guys who wore blue shirts, and I was the only guy who also had one pink shirt. Everything else was black and white, literally black and white. You know, and that
I
was
mean, that's one
all.
of the reasons I only wear black and white. I can't bring myself to, like, I own one pair of jeans. I always wear black.
Do you wash a lot? Do you do the laundry a lot?
I never wear it.
Oh,
I always wear black or black and white. Like, I just can't bring myself, you know, like there's a so, but like you, so for us, it was hats. Who wore the fancier hats? Right. That was so absolutely. There's a question in the question by Sherry Young. Is your comment about missing the mark like the alcoholic longing for spirit and settling for spirits? In other words, do we settle? So it's funny, right? Because I say this all the time, right? When you reach for the Jim Beam, it says on the bottle distilled spirits, right? And it's a spiritual solution, right? You're looking for the spirit. But yes, the alcoholic looking for the spirits, the alcohol looking for that question, for that solution is, right? We believe addiction in that sense is a spiritual malady, right?
yeah. I think every mask that we wear, addiction, seeking, you know, working hard, success, what it's all seeking spiritual connection.
Right.
It's all seeking to be seen and to feel valued, which
Right.
is a spiritual concept.
Right. And to hide the pain, right? To be in like, you know, and that's really the difficult part, right? Because sort of that the pain is a space that I don't matter, I'm not seen, I don't fit in, right? Something's wrong with me, and we try to dilute that with alcohol and gambling and sex and all these things, right? And it works for a while, because then we can just be like everybody else. We don't have the social anxiety, we feel like everybody else, right? um we had
Anxiety, I just want to say, also anxiety also can be a mess. Like
absolutely
people pathologize themselves and then say, "Oh, I'm just anxious," or I'm depressed," or like, or I'm this type, or I'm AD. Like
right.
pathologizing ourselves can be a mess too, instead of like
Absolutely.
really being in touch with who I am.
In that sense, the mask is trying to hide us,
Correct.
give us an excuse for our behavior. Oh, sorry, I'm always late. I'm always late. Like,
Right.
no, right? That's not. That mean you're giving yourself an excuse in that sense, which is very, very difficult. And I
Right.
think that sort of, um, yeah, I mean, it's hard. David says, so it took 50 plus years to get into this mess. How long does it take to get out?
49.
So it's funny. My answer is one day.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
One
You
day.
can feel better. A person can feel better so fast. It's amazing to me always with recovery or anything like that. Like just the start of a process gives us such spirit, to borrow
Right.
Sherry's
Right.
word.
One day.
And
Uh,
Ruth said that she was at a JACS retreat many years ago, and there's an Orthodox rabbi that wore the craziest socks. And I bet
yes.
that Chaya Cole knows who that rabbi was. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen Chaya for many years, and it's really nice to see you.
Chaya goes, I think that the sum of total of who I've met, how I reacted to them, and what I've done in my life, isn't that true? I think I am the sum total. I've reacted. I would add, or instead of how I reacted, is how I choose to respond rather than how I reacted, right? How I choose to respond is who I am, right? Reaction takes away our ability to really measure what our actions are. And I think spirituality is changing from reaction to response. And then, yeah, we'll fill it with
So I
that.
wanted to come back if we could, Iggy, because I think this is what Rick was asking at the beginning, and also maybe David and one other person was asking, which is like, okay, so like, what do we do once a person, we know we have these masks? I think it's about um, really learning to um, to get to know yourself. It's why, for example, in recovery, or even I would say if a person starts going to therapy, is like take a break from relationships and dating other people to date yourself, to get to know yourself, because so much of all the masks and the behaviors that we have are ways that we are not our authentic selves. And so it takes a while, and it's an ongoing process. It's an imperfect process of getting to know who's the real me, who's
Right.
the real um, who's the real Gary, who's the real Iggy.
You know, one of the old interventions that we do with people, or when I started work with people, is uh, take a piece of paper and and a pen, and keep it in your pocket, and throughout the day do this interaction that I called the lies I tell myself. Every time you tell yourself a lie, write it down, right? And it could be anything, right? Or I'm not worth anything, or I'm too fat, or I just said I'm richer than I am, or whatever it is. I just pretended to be nice. um the reason is not to make things, but if you look at this piece of paper at the end of the day, you will see the mask that you wear. You will see what happens, and that will inform the work, right? And I would highly suggest for those, right, to find a spiritual counselor, or right, or somebody, so like Gary, right, so like who can do both spirituality and clinical work, right, and really uh find somebody to take that list apart with you and find the reason of what you're doing and choose something else. I think fundamentally for me, and reason why I like these conversations, is that we have a choice. We're not victims of, thank you. I mean, we're not a victim of our surroundings, right? We're not a victim of this. The masks that we put on and take off are our choice. And it's, in that sense, like you talked about the masks, and it's hard not to think about COVID masks, right? And we were talking about yesterday, like, um, here's a mask, right? That covers you. It covers our smile. It covers our face, right? It has political ramifications, of course, but this mask also saves your life,
Right.
right?
So
Or the life of others.
it makes it harder to be seen, right? Right, like I moved to a new area during the pandemic
Right.
upstate New York, in a small town, and I still haven't made many friends because every time I walk in the coffee shop, they don't really know it's me. I thought about getting a mask that has my name on it, like, hi, my name is Gary, but they don't know it's me. And so normally I would make friends within a week because that's just how I
Right.
am. But you don't get seen, but it saves your life.
Right.
That's
And,
what masks do.
right. And in some places, right, the complexity, it makes you seen of where you stand with this, right? Like that you wearing a mask, it makes you see like, this is what matters to me. It's funny. I always have like this, I don't know how people feel like, and this ambivalent feeling about the plain mask, and then people choose different masks with like a pattern or thing, whatever. Like I always feel like, should I express myself through the mask or not? And by the way, there's this movement in terms of hospitals. Some masks have like a opening, because I always think about people who are hard of hearing, and they can't see lips, they can't read lips, right? And in hospital, or they can't see a smile, and how hard it is if everything, like, I have a fairly harsh face, and now, especially in winter in New York, I have a mask, and then I have my beanie, so you only see this, right? So like, it's not,
So you're wearing a burqa.
pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Are you saying, by the way, Iggy, that what you're saying is that people who choose not to wear masks during the pandemic, it's actually a spiritual seeking to be seen better? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that sort of that when they choose not to wear that mask, is they reveal more than they conceal, right? In that sense.
Yeah, I was
Um,
grateful with the question.
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. But and this is, I think, sort of like, we have about 9 minutes to this, right? And feel free, by the way, to write more questions if you have, and we can answer in the last 9 minutes of it. But we're back to Purim, right? And people wearing costumes and stuff. And I don't know if you feel the same way, right? So that people wear the costumes, and the costume they wear, they think they're hiding behind the costume. But really, I'm like, I get to see the real you. Like I get to see what's the inner desire. All of a sudden, if you wear the clothes of your wife, or you dress like a superhero or whatever it is, right? All of a sudden I'm like, this actually reveals more than you think that it conceals.
Right. So I'll give you a funny story that I don't know if she's on it, and I thought she was before. My sister, Michelle, she for years has done a 3-day breast cancer walk because her mother had breast cancer, and Michelle too. And she, one year when I did it with her, one of the days she wore a costume called Encouragement Girl. And she would like encourage all the women and a few men who were doing this 3-day walk, and she would give them courage. And she had a mask and a cape and the whole thing. But the truth is, that's her even without the costume.
Right.
Like her costume reveals her inner self.
That's right. And many people think that they can hide behind the mask. And I think that's true for definitely, I think for you and me who have people come to us for help. They think, right, that the mask they wear hides them. But for us, right, and one of the most things that I say, like, I see you. I see through this mask.
Yeah.
Right. The mask tells me everything I need to know about this. And it also informs what the path is to get to a better place. You know? We literally have just a couple minutes. I think that in one way I'm encouraged by one of the gifts I think the pandemic has given us, which is that a lot of us have lost, right? Hi, encouragement girl. Thanks. I think one of the things is sort of that we lost is our one of our needs for pretense. I think a lot of us have become a lot more open about what really matters, right? Like I said before, like the world is upside down, but my priorities have come into order.
Sorry, there's a noise outside that.
Oh, it's okay.
Now it's either like a firework or a gun. So
right. Well, you are in Florida, so you know. But
sorry.
Sorry, don't come at me, Florida people. It's a joke. But I think that if we can take that part from the pandemic into the next stage of the new normal life, is to sort of like rely on each other, that we all are anxious, that we all have insecurities, that we don't have, right, the patience for stupid celebrities sort of like vacationing in somewhere, like, right, so that to really take more authenticity, that will help all of us take off some of those maladaptive masks. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, I do. I think it's an opportunity to I think that's, one of the challenges of the pandemic is that we haven't been able to distract ourselves with some of the masks that we usually use, like that are more acceptable, like going all the time. I'm driving 5 carpools. I got to go to work. I'm back. We've had to sit and be still. And so alcohol use has gone up. Other things have gone up for some people, right? But it's forced us to well, what am I without these distractions? And I've shared this before when I did a different webinar early in the pandemic. Like for me, it was really uncomfortable. Right. Like I didn't I'm on the go a lot, like you. And so all of a sudden I didn't have that. And I was like, I'm left with myself. Right. And so then who is that? And so it's also interesting. I just was thinking while you're talking, Iggy, that I feel like every decade, not the 20s, but 30 on, 30s, 40s, 50s, every decade is oh, this is the decade where I really come into myself, right? Like people in their 30s, that's what I said it, that's what they say. In their 40s, now I know who I am. 50s, I think that's really, that speaks to this journey of taking off all these masks and caring less about these things that we thought we cared about, or that we were told or we learned to care about, and be okay, that doesn't matter to me. I don't need to have this many friends on social media. I need to have 3 besties that I talk to every week. Right. I would trade that any day, to have those people that I speak to all the time over the, all the likes on a post or on an Instagram thing. For sure. Wait till your 70s. Yes, Sherry. Actually, somebody I spoke to yesterday, who I think she's in her 80s, a therapist, that's what she was talking about, like what her 80s were for, like legacy.
Right. Liz, I think it is funny, David. But Rick Morton asked, like, any words of wisdom about how we learn to trust our intentions? Can't take all my mask off instantaneously, but want to keep doing the work. So I'm sure Gary has his own answer, but I will say
I
that
don't see the question. Maybe it's just to you.
it's in the Q&A. No, it's in the Q&A.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine.
Right. Any words on that? I would say, Rick, like everything else, the thing is that you trust your intentions, but making sure that you share your intentions with somebody else, with a friend, with a confidant, whatever, in connections.
And I was going to say the same exact thing, which is that having a group of people around you that you let see you, and then will give you honest feedback, not just a attaboy or a pat on the back or whatever, or affirm, but they'll be like, that doesn't sound great. That doesn't seem great. Like I found that having that, like a mentor, a group of friends that you can talk to and like sound stuff out. And so in a recovery program, that would be like a sponsor and other people who were peers in life. It doesn't have to be just in recovery programs, but it's letting yourselves be known. Am I still on? I see that. I think my screen just changed. Letting yourself be known to other people. One of the things, David, one of the things that like I try to do if I go to a new place, except if there's a pandemic, is to become known. I want people to know me because that will teach me, they'll help me learn who I am because they'll keep me honest. People that I can't lie to or bullshit. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that Iggy.
I'm right here. I'm just like trying to figure out
Okay.
why the camera just decided to not cooperate.
And I just want to say that Ruth mentioned here that she found out who she was at 64. And I think that, I mean, there's so much truth in that because there's so many, it's not just finding out who you are at 64. I'm going to speak for you, Ruth. I don't know. Because I think we find out who we are many, many times. There are times when like I have this a deeper understanding of me. It doesn't mean I didn't know before. We see you now, Iggy. It doesn't mean I didn't know before. It means I know in a different way. I understand myself in a deeper way than I did before. It wasn't, I highly doubt that your first 64 years were completely, blind. Yes, I agree, Christine. We're always evolving and we're becoming more connected. And there is a sense sometimes when we hit a bump and we're like, oh, I didn't understand this about myself. And when we see ourselves in a new mask, we feel like everything before was for naught, but that's not true, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with everything you just said. And I think as always, the answer is in connection, right? The hours is in connection. The answer is in the ability for us to sort of reflect in the most, I think sort of to kind of wrap it up and to tie it back to Purim, one of the reasons why the God, as you said, doesn't appear in the Megillah, but I always say, right, God is not here. If you really want to talk to God, find another person and look them in the eye. If we are God's creation, which we are, God is in each one of us. So this is absolutely part of it. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for this really amazing conversation. As always, it's sort of fascinating and illuminating. People can find you through, right? So the Center for Intimacy Recovery, right? Gary runs groups and individual sessions. And so like I encourage people to take advantage of his. And of course, we are the Tshuva Center, tshuvacenter.org. We have groups next Friday is our pop-up Shabbat. So, and it's in honor of March and being International Women's Month, we're going to honor as many women and the feminine and the sacred feminine in the service. So join us for that, for pop-up Shabbat on the 5th. Otherwise, we wish you again a happy Purim, a sober Purim, a safe Purim, a freilichen Purim. Thank you for joining us, everybody. It's really nice to see everyone. Thanks again, Gary. This has been really, really fun.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Talk to you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.